right. Good morning, everybody, and welcome once again to NextLeap's cracking product interview edition, root cause analysis. Yes, for the past couple of weeks, we've been doing a bunch of mock interviews, figuring out how to answer different types of questions one can expect in an interview when you're trying to crack into your dream product role at the top tech companies. We've had digital marketers, engineers, we've had freshers, we've had web developers. We've had a whole lot of people attempting these mock interviews with none other than Anirban Das, who's not just an instructor at NextLeap's Product Manager Fellowship, but he's also the Senior Director of Product at Ola Electric. He's also the man behind one of our most favorite daily apps called Dunzo. So thank you so much, Anirban, for joining in this morning again.
My pleasure. Really looking forward to today's session.
Thanks a lot. And while Anirban Das is going to be preparing a volley of questions today for Shrey, who has joined us in this morning from Ahmedabad. He is a final year student of the computer science. And more importantly, he was also part of our fourth cohort of the Product Manager Fellowship at NextLeap, and he passed out as a top fellow. Today, he's going to be on the hot seat where he's going to be taking all these questions. Now, what's different about today's edition? Well, guess what? A lot of you reached out to us and told us that, hey, interviews are great. What about root cause analysis? How do we approach answering RCA type of questions? And starting today, we're going to be doing just that. We're going to have a bunch of these interview questions focused only on RCA. What's going to happen about it? Anirban's throwing these questions at Shrey. Shrey is going to field them off. And while this is happening, Anirban is making his specific notes. So at the end of the interview, Anirban is going to share his screen, show you exactly how an interviewer would be making notes, putting down pointers, identifying patterns, and he's going to tell you how not to answer these questions. So stay tuned till the end, because towards the end, it's also very interactive. You get to ask all the questions that you have directly to Anirban. So just give me a moment. I'm going to start spotlighting these folks, and we should get started. Over to you guys. Have a lovely interview.
Good morning, Shrey. Why don't we start? Why don't we start off with a quick 2-minute introduction where you can tell the audience about yourself, and then we'll get started.
Sure. Hi everyone. I'm Shrey. I'm a BTech undergrad pursuing computer science at Indus University. I'm currently in my final year. Apart from my academic subjects, I pursued the fields of game development and quantum computing. I found out that these fields were very interesting, but I couldn't see myself pursuing them. So I was on a set path to become a full stack web developer until I was introduced to product management. And I enrolled in the NextLeap fellowship, and one thing led to another, and here I
am. So let's start off with your computer science engineering degree, right? Can you talk about like a recent CS project or assignment that you've done that either you really enjoyed it or you were challenged by it, something that you remember vividly?
Sure. A recent project that I found was very challenging, and I learned a lot of new things from it, was designing a chess game using an object-oriented programming language and building it from the scratch.
Okay. And this includes the entire end-to-end, the logic, the UI, everything?
Yeah, from the logic to the UI implementation.
Got it. And what language did you code this in?
I coded this in Ruby language.
Ruby. Okay, got it. Can you talk about during this project, there must have been 1 or 2 places where you were stuck and you couldn't figure out what to do next. Can you talk about one of those?
Yeah, one of the difficulties I found was when I was trying to implement certain chess rules. One of the chess rules, it's called en passant. It's a complicated rule where if you move your pawn 2 squares, and if there is an adjacent enemy pawn, not right in front of you, so the adjacent pawn can kill your pawn. So it's not the conventional way how a pawn attacks. So implementing that was very difficult. I think it took the majority of the time of my development.
And why was it so? I'm aware of the en passant rule, but it's a pattern that can be detected. So why did you find it difficult to implement this compared to like other ways pawns can capture?
Because it comes with a lot of constraints. For example, for the en passant rule to work, you'll first of all you have to detect that the pawn is adjacent. The second thing is the last move should have been a 2 square push. It cannot be a 1 square push. The third thing is that the en passant move is only available for the turn being. If you choose not to take the en passant, you cannot do it in the next move. So
Got it.
implementing these constraints was difficult.
Okay. What about like I'm sure as you were coding this project, there would have been bugs. Can you talk about a bug that took you like a long time to solve? Were there any bugs like that?
Uh, can I take a 30 seconds to just think up? Uh,
Sure, sure.
okay, so a bug that I encountered during the project was during implementing the move of castling, where uh, there's a rule that you cannot castle if the final position lands the king under a check.
Okay.
So, but my program was not registering it as an illegal move, and I could perform that, which was like a bug.
Okay. And how did you like? So once you knew that, okay, this one is relatively easy to test. Once you realize that, okay, this is not happening, how did you go about finding where the problem was and how did you eventually fix it?
So actually, from the starting of the project itself, I've been writing unit tests for my program. So
Okay.
what I do is whenever I create a program, whenever I create a function, I first write the unit test for it, like what inputs would it take and what output would it give. The inner workings is still not decided, but that doesn't matter because only the inputs and the output matter. So when my unit tests fail, I came to realize that yeah, this is a bug that I'm facing, and rectifying it was relatively very simple.
Okay. And what unit test did you write for? Like, if you could describe the unit test that you wrote for the castling should not land and check feature or use case.
Okay, so for the castling feature, I had several unit tests that um, it determined that all the illegal possibilities are covered. For example, the king should not have moved before. The rook should have not moved before. If it's a short castle or if it's a long castle, how much distance the king and the rook has to move. The final position should not land the king under check. Uh, and yeah, these were the possibilities that I covered in my unit tests.
Got it. Okay. Uh, I see you're from Ahmedabad. It's a lovely city. I've spent some time there as well. What is your like in your opinion, and you've been there a fair amount of time. What are the top 2, 3 problems that you believe Ahmedabadis face?
Okay, as an Ahmedabadi, okay. Can I take a minute or so to think of the problems?
Sure, sure.
Okay, so I've identified a couple of problems. The first is finding traditional Gujarati, snacks like khaman or patran, etc. Because these snacks are usually sold on stalls, on the roadsides, and because of bigger brands, companies like Walia and Bikaner Wala, they too are starting to sell these products, and they're completely making these stalls run out of businesses. And the authentic flavor, they cannot match the stalls authentic flavor. So actually finding good stalls across Ahmedabad for the traditional foods is one difficulty that we face.
Okay.
And the second is uh, conversing with someone who's not a localite. So most of the conversation, like, it takes place in Gujarati or Hindi. But let's say um, let's say I brought a friend of mine from, like, he was from South, and he was not very comfortable with the Hindi or Gujarati. So, and majority, like, if you want to get a rickshaw, or if you want to ask for directions, or uh, any simple activity that you want to do in Ahmedabad, like, it requires you to have knowledge of their language. So language barrier with foreign people from foreign states, like, that's another difficulty
Got it.
that we face.
Got it. So let's talk about, like, let's talk about the language barrier, right? And if you were to think about the need for Hindi or Gujarati as a problem statement, and let's assume that a user persona here is just like your friend, someone who does not know Hindi or Gujarati. What do you think are the causes of this problem? So let me redefine the problem statement again. Person moves to Ahmedabad, does not know Hindi and Gujarati, and the problem statement is, how does this person get very basic things done in Ahmedabad? So if you had to root cause this problem, how would you go about root causing this problem? Like, what's the first question you will ask?
So if I'm understanding correctly, the problem statement is not being able to converse
Not being able to converse with localites. Yes.
with the localites.
Yes.
So I feel the questions that I'll ask, I'm not aware of, like, what my role here is. Could you please repeat?
So
What am I
your role,
supposed to?
let's say your role is, you're the tourism minister, or someone who's responsible for making sure that people who are coming into the state, they are comfortable and they are able to, they're assimilated into the state so that they can become productive and contribute to the economy of the state. So some government official, whose role is to make sure that the experience for incoming people into the state is great.
Okay.
And this is
And
the
I have to
problem
identify.
statement, that people who are coming in, they are not able to converse with localites. That's the problem statement given to you.
And I have to find the root cause of why they're not able to do so.
Yes, you have to find the root cause of this problem. Like, the first level cause is that, okay, person does not know Gujarati and Hindi, and most people in the state seem to be comfortable in Gujarati and Hindi.
Yeah. I think it boils down to the fact that they are from a different place where these languages are not being used frequently. It's of no use to them, so they didn't bother learning it. So, and now that they're having this cultural shift, it has become a problem for them. So that's the reason. That's the main underlying cause for this.
Okay, so you're saying no need for the, like, Gujarati or Hindi language in their state. What other causes could exist?
There could be difficulty in learning these languages, trying to understand them and memorize a new language.
Okay, so difficulty in learning these languages. What else? What about the other side? Like,
I'm sorry, I didn't get you. Like the
So
other.
there are two parts to a conversation, right? So
Yeah.
one part of the problem is that like an incoming person is unable to converse in Hindi or Gujarati, but they may be able to converse in English or Tamil or Kannada, right?
Okay,
Um,
so from the Ahmedabad's perspective, okay,
yes, yes,
okay,
yes.
okay. So the other issue is that Ahmedabadis didn't feel the need to learn English because their jobs were getting done and they were localites, and usually uh, people you're not very comfortable with English or Hindi. It's the main reason underlying cause could be that they have not been schooled to to be taught these languages.
Okay, okay, okay. Let's talk about, you mentioned the difficulty in learning these languages, right? Let's, for the purpose of this discussion, let's assume that that's the main reason as to why someone from the south or someone from outside Gujarat does not learn Gujarati. Why is learning Gujarati difficult?
Okay. I just take a minute to list down.
And to make this is sort of abstract, so to make this more concrete, you can use your friend's example and just assume why is learning Gujarati difficult for him or her.
Okay, so I've come up with the following things that make learning Gujarati a difficult process. First is pronunciation of words. Some words is difficult, so you're not able to remember what was actually being meant. The second is there was
So
no
sorry,
motivation.
can you elaborate that? So pronouncing the word is difficult, but you said something about meaning there as well.
Yeah, so you know how like when we're trying to learn a new language and we heard certain words, it's difficult to pronounce. We don't want to risk, offending the other person, by
Okay, by
butchering the pronunciation.
mispronouncing. Okay, okay,
Yeah, or we could accidentally say a word that like we didn't mean to say, something like that. So it could butcher the whole conversation.
okay,
The second being uh, less motivation to learn because my friend was here for a brief period of time. He didn't find it appealing to invest into learning Gujarati and understanding the culture over here. He was just here for a few days, so there was a
okay,
lack of motivation. The third is you not only need to learn how to talk, but also read Gujaratis because all the signboards on the highways or all the publicity that's been done. It's usually in Gujarati. So reading and talking, there are two main aspects. Writing we can ignore because that I don't think that would be encountered by a traveler that often. And the fourth one would be the way of writing. Like um, we're not using English alphabets over here, so the Gujarati alphabet. So the style of writing is also different.
got it.
So registering those new patterns and registering these new patterns to form images from images and correlation is difficult.
Okay, so let's talk about the pronunciation cause, right? And that can be one of the reasons why learning a new language is difficult. Why is pronouncing some Gujarati words difficult? There is the fear aspect of it, which is like, what if you mispronounce something? But why is it difficult for someone who is familiar in one language to pronounce words in another language?
It's because the person who's trying to learn is unaware of the fact that what's being actually written and what's being pronounced is most of the time it's same, but there is some cultural twist to it all the time. For example, the word ritu, it's been like, if you learn how to write ritu and recognize that, yeah, that's the word ritu, but it's actually pronounced as rutu in Gujarati. It's the pronouncing is different. So not only you'll have to like learn the correct grammar, but you also need to know what's the latest way like the people are saying, pronouncing these words. So the
Okay.
not matching up of what's being written and what's being said is another difficulty, is one of the difficulty.
Okay. If you had to like learn Czechoslovakian or some completely unfamiliar language, right? Um, why would you face difficulties in pronouncing new words? Like, what are all the possible causes?
Okay, I'll just take a minute and
Sure.
I've come up with three basic reasons which could lead to difficulty in learning how to pronounce things. The first being not being if you're trying to learn how to pronounce by reading, you might not be able to, you might see letters or symbols which you don't know the meaning of, whether that's a separate word, whether that's a combination of word. You might not be aware of that. Second would be, if you're trying to learn by listening to others, people who are fluent in, let's say, Czechoslovakian, you won't be able to figure out distinct words because they'll be speaking it fluently. For them it's very easy. So carefully breaking down each words and how the what ends where and when does another word starts, you'll not be able to figure out the difference in that. And the third being, even if you figure that out, and at some part of the country the accent might change, and which could conflict with your already established patterns of recognizing words.
Got it. Okay. Um, do you listen to music, Shay?
Yes, I do.
What is your favorite genre of music?
uh, I don't listen by genre, but I like listen by artists. So
So okay. So who is your favorite artist?
I love listening to The Weekend.
To who?
The Weekend.
The Weekend. Okay, got it. And like, what music app do you use to listen to The Weekend?
I usually have all the songs downloaded on my phone, but I sometimes do use YouTube to listen to the music.
YouTube. Got it. Okay. So let's say that song plays or video plays in the case of YouTube from the weekend has dropped by 80% this month. Okay. What are the hypotheses that you can form as to why this might have happened?
Okay. So I'd like to just repeat the question. The listening rate of weekends music has the videos there has been an 80% decline in monthly listens to his songs on
Yes.
YouTube.
Yes.
Okay. So I'd like to first clarify a few things. What is it that we mean by listen? Is it like just opening the video or listening the entirety of the songs, or do we have a
You can
certain?
define it as uh, playing at least 5 seconds of the song.
Okay. Okay. Since when are we seeing this monthly drop? Has it?
So December and January. So if we compare um, first 18 days of December and first 18 days of November, then we've seen this drop happen in December.
Have you seen this trend along? Have you seen this similar trend with other popular artists as well, or has it only been the weekend?
No, it's primarily been uh, like the weekend, but there are so many artists, right? So it's hard to say whether it's happened for others or not. But
Okay.
YouTube overall, like, listens, that is fine. That is not dropped by this extent.
Lately, has there been any negative PR regarding the weekend, which might have led to this decline or disinterest?
Negative PR around the weekend.
Yeah, like uh, people, they started to dislike the weekend and they don't want to listen. Any
No,
external factors like these?
nothing negative about the weekend.
Okay, has YouTube had any recent app updates or some changes to the user flow? How do we listen or something like that?
No, and as I said, right, YouTube overall listens have been fine.
Okay. And has they been observed on a specific mobile device or only the web app, or has it been across all different channels of YouTube?
Across all channels.
And do we have any data regarding the user demographic, certain age group that has stopped listening, or from a certain region that we have seen this decline?
So okay, your hypothesis is that it's happened for certain age groups. No, we've seen this for most user cohorts.
Okay. So now that I've clarified a few things regarding this, what I'll do is I'll try to go through the user journey and try to break down each stage and try to figure out where the exact problem is occurring, why the, why people are not viewing his videos. So
Okay.
I'll take a few minutes to jot down the journey and I'll get back to you.
Okay.
Okay, so there are three broad stages over here. The first is opening the app. So are they as you told earlier that the other artists, the music playing is similar, is more or less the same for everyone else. So I'm disregarding this, that there has been any problem regarding opening up the app. The search is the second part is getting to the weekend, getting to the video of weekend's music, which can be done by mainly two things. First, the user could search for his music, and the second is his music being recommended to people. So has there been any decline in the number of searches for weekend, or the number of videos that are being recommended to the week for to the people?
Okay, so let's say that your hypothesis is that search is the cause of the problem. Instead of asking me a direct question on whether there has been a problem or not, if you were at YouTube, what data would you request for? Like, what data would you look at in a dashboard, or what data would you raise a request for the analytics team at YouTube?
And I'm hypothesizing that search has been the cause for
Yes,
the
you're
decline.
hypothesizing that yes, search is the cause.
I'll just take a couple of seconds to note some points down.
Sure.
So the activity of searching can be broken down into three stages. First is input, second is the processing, and the third is displaying of the output. So I'd first look at the number of times people are using the search bar. The second would be the number of times they're entering the word the weekend in the search bar browser. These could, either people are not using the search bar at all, which has led to the searching weekend at all, which has led to the decline. The second would be uh, the people are putting in the searches, but there has been some difficulty processing the search results on the YouTube server for some reason. And the third would be, if the processing is also correct, then there has been an issue regarding displaying of the search results of the videos.
Okay.
So the number of results that are being outputted would be another data that I'll look at.
Okay. So let's say that these are the initial set of data points that you want. If you could open up either Google Sheet or Excel, right, and draw out what you would, I'm assuming these would be in the form of tables, right, of some form.
Yes.
How would those tables look like?
Okay. So should I share my screen and
Yeah,
I'll draw the table.
You can share your screen, and basically I want you to convert the request that you raised in English for data request just in the format of a table.
Sorry, I'm not able to understand the converting the request to the, won't the request be in the form of query or something like that?
I mean, the output of the request would be a table, right? Like,
Okay,
for
so
example,
understood. Okay, so what the request we're making, what the table output will see, I
yes,
have to
yes,
come up with that. Okay.
yes. And maybe you can pick the search processing. So if let's say weekend related searches, you were looking to analyze those results, then what's the sort of data that you would visualize and look at? Okay, if there's any problem with search processing for weekend related search queries.
Okay. Emma, could you just repeat one more time what the objective is over here?
So you said that, okay, if the problem is within search, you would look at breaking down search into input, processing, and output. You would look at number of times people using the search bar, and you would look at weekend related searches. Now, weekend related searches, let's say I'm an analyst on your team. If you tell me you want to look at weekend related searches, that may not always be enough information for me to actually give you what you want, right? So I want you to detail out exactly how you would look at weekend, like create sample test data using your unit test analogy. Create sample test data for how you would analyze weekend related searches.
So am I supposed to come up with the keywords that people might use to
Yeah,
search?
example keywords, like what is the data that you're going to look at in order to validate or invalidate your hypothesis?
Okay.
Like how will you, if you put yourself in a real world scenario, how will you know, okay, it's a problem with like processing weekend related search queries? That was one of your hypotheses, right? If it's still not clear, what I mean is you would have maybe 3 rows, which are basically common search queries based on your context of weekend. And then you would look at, okay, what is the number of times the query was fired? What is the number of times that a result was returned? What are the number of results returned, right? These are the metrics that you would look at in order to. So that's what I mean.
Okay. So should I share it after that I've come up with the table, or as I'm making it?
Or whatever you're comfortable with.
Okay, so I'll just take 2 minutes to make the table and then I'll share it.
Sure.
Okay, so I've come up with the table. Could I get the permission to share my screen? The host has to enable sharing screen.
Yeah, I have with that. You should be able to share now. Please check.
Yes, I'm able to. Okay. Is it visible? Is what I'm sharing
Yes.
visible? Okay, so the table would comprise of the popular
Yeah, I can see
keywords.
what's on the screen. So, if can you fill in some numbers for like sample numbers for each of the cells, maybe for the first search query.
Sure.
Okay, now I'm assuming you would compare these month over month to see whether there's been any changes or not, right? So if you could
Yes.
just maybe represent that somehow, maybe next to it or something,
Okay. Uh,
or just maybe add a column between A and B saying, okay, this is November, this is December.
oh, okay.
Yeah, this works. Now,
I'll fill it up with like another set of random data to compare it to. Okay.
no, so no need to fill it up with. If it helps you, you can. But my next question is, let's say that so your ratio of average number of results to time searched in a day is about 0.1%, right? Um, let's assume that this number is for December, and let's say in November this number was 0.5%. So you were seeing 500. Let's say time searched in a day was the same. Um,
Okay.
but you were seeing 500 results in November and that number dropped to 100. What are some hypotheses that you have for why this might have been the case?
All right. So the current issue is the number of results that are being shown on the search query has declined. Okay. I just take 2 minutes to come up with possible hypothesis.
Sure.
Okay. So two broad reasons for that could be, one is that a search query favors recent results, and the weekend might not have uploaded songs in the month of December. Let's compare to, let's say, November. So the displayed search query, so the number of results haven't declined. Another could be the weekend has been uploading his videos titled or thumbnailed, differently, which would, be treated differently by the search algorithm. So it's not able to recognize that this is a weekend's video, and hence the number of search results are less.
Okay. Okay. Um, let's talk about Spotify now. So I've gone through the case study that you submitted, not Spotify, sorry, IMDb, the case study that you submitted. So just for the context of the audience, I'll quickly summarize what the case study was all about. So the problem that you were trying to solve is how do you get more people to actually write reviews on IMDb? That's essentially the problem statement. So um, question for you is, let's say the percentage of IMDb users who write reviews has fallen 80% over the last 3 years. So it's a really long-term decline. Um, how would you go ahead and identify root causes, and like what hypothesis do you have for root causes?
Okay, 80%. So the process here would be similar to, I'll go through the user's journey here and try to figure out at what stage, you know the problem is occurring, when why the users are not able to, write a review. So
Okay.
okay, so the stages are: user comes to the app, searches up or lands on the title that they want to review. The third is uh, the actual review writing process, and the fourth is the review being posted. So uh, one hypothesis could be that the users are not even like coming to the app itself. They're shifted to a competitor product, or they're not interested in reviewing entirely. The second could be users have there has been a decline in, watching of digital watching of the content. So there's nothing to review there. So people are not reviewing for the past 3 years.
Okay.
Uh, the third would be the review writing process has become very tedious, and it's nobody wants to put in the effort to write a review here. The process is full of fiction, so people are not writing reviews.
So, so if you had to look at, you mentioned three things, right? Review writing process, reviews being posted, and number of people actually watching and viewing the content. If you assume that, or if you want to validate or invalidate the hypothesis of the review writing process, what data would you look at?
I would look at the number of people landing on the page where you start to write a review, and the number of reviews that are actually being posted.
Okay, so number of people arriving at. Okay. Okay, what else?
And the number of times the user left midway. No, but that would be like we'll know that by comparing the ratio, comparing these two.
Okay. Okay, what about if, let's say, the number of people writing reviews, when you look at this data, the number of people landing on the review writing part of the journey, that has actually increased year over year, but the number of reviews has gone down by 80%. What's the next, like what additional data would you look at?
So they're able to land on the page where they'll be given a form to write a review,
Yes.
but the posted reviews are less.
Yes.
I'd look at the average word count of the reviews that are actually being posted. I'd look at the click-through rate of the review post button.
You would look at what?
Uh, the average word count of the length of the review that are being actually posted.
Okay.
The
What
second,
else? So average length of reviews. What else? Anything else?
the type of titles that are being reviewed, to the type, whether there is a preference for certain genre of shows that are only being reviewed, something like that, which titles are frequently being reviewed, which titles are not.
Okay. Anything else?
And no, I'm blanking out of it.
Okay. Cool. So thank you so much, Ray. I think that was my last question. I'll just quickly share my feedback with you. So I'll share my screen. Okay. So we started off with your introduction and your comp science background. You spoke about, how you used like Ruby to actually uh, program a chess game. So I think this part you answered fairly well. So it showed basically that you were, fairly deep in the problem, and you were able to, when probed, you were able to actually talk about the specifics. So I asked you about, where did you actually get stuck? You spoke about en passant. You spoke about exactly why en passant was uh, difficult to implement. You also spoke about the castling rule and how, the past moves aspect of the castling rule, and whether the king lies in check or not. I think so. So this part, I think you were extremely effective at actually going and explaining what you did. Um, then I asked about, where you were actually stuck, and you were able to explain exactly why you were stuck as well. So this part, I don't have any like suggested improvement. I think you answered this really well. The Ahmedabad section of the interview, I think you introduced, the context and the two problems fairly well, using examples of your own, and explaining, why it was a problem. Um, then when we got to, and this was a fairly abstract problem, so I don't know whether you would have expected a problem like this or not. But when we got into, what do you think are causes of the language problem, right? So two things that you did well is you paraphrased the question just to make sure that you understood it. And then you asked a good follow-up question saying that, what is your role in all of this? So these are good things. For the 4 hypotheses that you initially came up with, right? I think initially you came up with 2. You approach this completely from the point of view of the person who's visiting the state. But you did not think about like from the other part of communication. Communication is two-sided, that you could have possibly included when you were coming up with the hypothesis. But when I nudged you, you actually went ahead and said that, similar problems exist on the Ahmedabad side as well. So you were able to cover that. Now, when we got into a slightly bit more depth, which is why was learning Gujarati difficult for your friend, I think the first level causes for this, the first 3 were good. But other than talking, needing to read since signboards, right? That's not really a cause. That's basically another aspect or facet of the problem. That's basically that it's a benefit of solving the problem. It's not a cause of why the problem exists in the first place. So that's just a sentence framing thing. Then we went into the next level of depth, saying that, why is pronouncing Gujarati words actually difficult for someone? So there, I think you got stuck a little bit. You said that, person who is trying to learn is also trying to write and pronounce. You used an example about, Ritu versus Rutu. But I think you could have articulated it saying, I captured it as unlearning, but I think the problem that you were trying to refer to is that different words may have different sounds in different language. So you need to unlearn a sound in a language and then learn it in the other language. That's at least what my interpretation was. So that could have been done better. But you could have possibly gone deeper and spoken about, unfamiliarity with certain sounds, or when you learn any language, right? Like the vowels and the consonants and the sounds each of them produce and how they combine with each other, right? So I think you could have gone a little bit more deeper. Now, of course, language, it would have been a lot of time before you've learned language. So it's okay, but there is a lot more content that you could have actually gone into. Nothing against this because it's an obscure subject, right? So interviews are not typically testing for knowledge, but I think you could have, and you took a lot of time on this, right? I think you could have broken it down into further this thing, like why would anyone have problems pronouncing anything, right? Which I think in the Czech one you actually referred to as well. So I think some of it could have come here. So then you on when I like tweak the question and I put you on the spot saying that if you went to a country like Czechoslovakia, where would you struggle? I think you were able to come up with some of these answers. So for example, not knowing what a letter or symbol means makes it harder to remember. And then because it's harder to remember, it's harder to pronounce, right? So I think that you were able to come up with. Not being able to break down words into its components, right? So these components exactly are the consonants and the vowels which have the sounds. So I think this you were able to come up with as well. Not being able to know when to start and end after hearing people, right? That was again a very good point. So I think all of these potentially you could have answered in this question itself, but you were able to do it when, I asked the follow-up question. So the point is that most cases interviewers will ask a follow-up, but maybe because of lack of time or other things that other questions that the interviewer has prepared, sometimes you may not be asked a follow-up. So having these as part of your initial answer would greatly improve your odds of sort of cracking this question, because you were able to come up with the answers. That's basically the point. Okay. Now on the Spotify one, again, I think the paraphrasing and clarifying questions, they were good. So that's something that you've got good at. Then now this is, I think, I'll talk about this here. So you immediately jumped into, could it be this? 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 Right? You asked, I think, 5 or 6 questions immediately, which were all of the nature of has there been any negative PR? Has there been any app updates, etc. Right? And I had clarified at the beginning that it's not a YouTube-wide problem. So your app update question and then your is this happening across any specific mobile device or channel, right? Those would typically affect the entire platform and not just Weekend as an artist. So I think once the first question got answered, right, I think you could have possibly factored in that information and avoided asking. And these 2 questions actually came back to back. So right after I said that, okay, there's no problem with app update, the next question that you asked was actually any specific mobile device or channel. So maybe you had written these down in your notes as, okay, these are the possible causes, but you'll need to factor in like the information that the interviewer is giving you, and then tweak your answer accordingly, right? Then you looked at, okay, do you have any data for age groups, etc.? Then has there been any problem with search? Okay. So now this, in my opinion, at least, there are multiple ways to answer these questions, but in my opinion, I think this is a structural problem in answering the RCA type of questions. So the structure that you're using is you're coming up with 5, 6, 7 different types of reasons, and then you're going one by one and asking the interviewer that, is it this, is it this, is it this? An alternate structure is, here are all my hypotheses. I came up to these hypotheses based on, like internal versus external or points of time in the user journey, right? Whatever is your method of coming up with this hypothesis. And then you go through, here is hypothesis 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Instead of asking the interviewer, is it this, is it that, right? And then not leaving it at that, saying that for each of the hypotheses, I would look at data to validate whether they are true or not. Here is an example for hypothesis 1. These are the 3 data points that I would look at. I think that is a much better approach to answer these types of questions, as opposed to like, is it this, is it that? Because the problem with the, is it like this, right? It almost becomes like, and I've seen this in multiple interviews now to at least see a pattern here, is that it almost becomes like, irrespective of the question, I'm going to always ask about whether there's been an app crash or not, whether there's been a negative PR activity or not, whether there's been a tech outage or not. Like those are hypotheses that you can apply to literally any problem, at least a digital product problem, right? So that seems to have become like a repetitive trend in interviews. I'm saying this of maybe 5 or 6 interviews such as this, but maybe you can think about the structure and see whether using it makes more sense or not. And you actually did some of that when I actually went one level deeper and asked you like the direct question on how would you validate, invalidate the hypothesis for search. So you said that, okay, I'm going to look at search, input, processing, and output. That same structure you could have gone ahead and said for like the initial YouTube question, right? So YouTube inputs are recommendation or the home page or the search bar, right? So you could have started there. So you could have used the same structure. Then you mentioned number of times people using search bar, weekend related. Here, possibly an improvement could be actually framing this as a metric. So number of times people using search bar is a metric. Weekend related searches is a metric. Processing search results, displaying of search results, though, aren't really articulated as metrics. So you could have said that, I'm going to look at search responses for weekend results. I'm going to look at CTR for weekend results. I'm going to look at latency for weekend related searches, right? Those are some of the things that you got in the table. Okay. On the table part, one last observation that I have is when you started to put together a table, I think you took almost 2-3 minutes to make the table and then you shared it. Now, not sharing the screen when working on something, I think it can be comforting in the moment because you've not actually put it together. So you may not be confident enough to share it. But at the same time, what it does is it does not make it clear to the interviewer whether you're going on the right track or you're gone completely off tangent. So if you had shared the screen right at the beginning, I could have told you to factor in the time aspect of the problem, right? You're investigating a drop, which is December over November. So factoring that into your data structure, I could have possibly told you that as you were working. So I think as a thumb rule, unless like you have no idea about the problem and you're going to be staring at a blank screen maybe for a minute, it may make sense to actually share the screen as you're breaking it down. Then we went into, okay, search results were down 5x. What could have been the cause? So you spoke about search query. So these I think were fine. So you said that, okay, these could be 2 hypotheses that could have led to a drop in that specific part. So I think this was answered reasonably well. On the IMDB question, the first part, right, where you said that, okay, I'm going to look at the user journey and what stage the problem is occurring. So that's the approach that you're using to solve the problem. So you verbalized the approach, but then you went silent for almost a minute. Now, usually when you're verbalizing an approach, you want to follow that up with, okay, here's what the user journey is, and here are the steps. And like that pause was a little bit awkward. And then when you actually spoke about searches on a app and landing on title page, reviewing the writing process, review being posted, right? I think it was, at least for my liking, it was a little bit too high level. Like I'll tell you a few examples of nuances that got missed, right? When you really look at the journey, you could have included person watches some content, person searches for some auxiliary content. It's all there in your case study, by the way. So person searches for some secondary content around the content that might bring the person to IMDb. At IMDb, person looks at the reviews, may want to write their own review. During writing their own review, here are the steps involved. Then the review actually gets posted. Maybe before posting, they're checking whether there are people who have, how many reviews might have been already posted, might be an input. Like, because a user who sees that there are already 10,000 reviews for a show versus a user who sees there are only 10 reviews for a show, right? Maybe the probability of posting reviews is different. So all those nuances and aspects, right, they got missed. Because you broke it down into only 3 steps. So it was somewhat a little bit high level. So one way that you could answer this question is you could start with these 3 and then ask, I'm going to go deeper into the first one. Would you like me to go deeper into the second one or the third one? Something like that, right? Or if the interviewer is not interrupting, you can just say that, okay, this is my first level breakdown. Now I'm going into the second level and breaking it down into multiple steps. Number of reviews, any length of reviews, type of, so reviewing is down 80%. What would you look at next? Okay, average length of reviews, type of titles, preference and genres, right? I think here you could have actually, like, again, broken down this review writing process into the steps of the user journey. These are cuts. So once reviews are written, you're looking at cuts of the data to identify whether there is a problem with a particular type of review or not. But if users writing review has fallen 80%, it is likely that this might be a more structural problem rather than a particular genre of reviews actually being down, right? So irrespective, I think this review writing process, the reason for me asking this follow-up question was, could you actually break down the review writing process into its component steps? So that did not come out through these 2 answers. So just to summarize, I think what you want to do is, whenever faced with like a root cause type of question, instead of firing like a volley of questions back to the interviewer, you could say that, okay, here are all my hypotheses. Do you think is one of these true? As opposed to making it like, I get the conversational aspect of it. That is one way to answer this question as well. But unfortunately, like, if it becomes like a series of yes no questions, right, there's not too much room and opportunity for conversation. So that's one thing that you can do. The second thing that you should be doing is, I think you need to factor in like some of the information which is being provided slightly better. So for example, YouTube wide problem or the drop being 80%, right? These are things that you could have factored into your answers. And third is, I think whenever you take these pauses, right, you want to make sure that after you've taken the pauses and then started to speak, you're continuously speaking in like a 2-minute or a 3-minute session with all the content that you've put together. So those would be my 3 thematic points and suggestions for you.
Yeah, actually, Anirban, you're correct in assuming that I have a standard set of questions that I'll ask irrespective of the context that is being provided by the interviewer. Because I was actually caught off guard when you frame the question as come up with some hypothesis. So what I thought was that isn't this incorrect? You're directly asking me to come up with hypothesis straight away. Shouldn't we in my mind the process is like, if it's a metric, I'll break down the metric, then I'll reach a user's journey, I'll figure out at what stage the user is facing the problem, and then maybe list a couple of things in that step that is bothering them, as opposed to directly being asked to come up with a hypothesis. So I was caught off guard, and so that was the reason I wasn't able to factor in the inputs that were being given by the interview.
Cool. So thanks, Shrey, though. I think a lot of points though were really, really good about each of the four questions. So that's a positive. So yeah, good
Yeah,
luck with
thanks,
the
Anirban.
actual interviews which are coming up.
Yeah, thank you, Anirban. This was really informative, like a detailed breakdown of all the aspects. I'll be sure to rewatch the whole session and learn few things. That was really helpful. Thank you.
All, all right. Thank you so much, Ray, for being in the hot seat and taking all those questions. And I'm glad this is going to help you out. Anirban, in fact, Anuradha has raised her hand. She has a question. Go for it, Anuradha. Anuradha, can you unmute yourself and speak? Are you there? Seems like she's not around. But on that note, thank you so much for that. Oh, all right, she's back. Yes, Anuradha, can you unmute yourself and speak? In case not, why don't you just put your message in the chat and we'll read it out. Awesome. All right. So while Anuradha is sharing her question with us, Anirban, any 3 tips to answering root cause analysis questions? Things to do or not do?
So I think some of it I spoke about when responding to Shrey is first thing to not do possibly is especially for the types of questions which are common to any product, right? Do not phrase them as like it should not appear like, okay, I'm going to, whatever be the question, I'm going to just say that, okay, is this internal or external? Is this not internal or external? Is this related to, the app being down, right? I think that is something that is definitely a not do. From a do's perspective, I think it is important to jot down like 4 or 5 different hypotheses or root cause or steps in the journey where you suspect that the problem might have happened, right? Whatever framework you are familiar with, and communicate them in one go, as opposed to asking like, is it this, is it this, is it this? That pattern of questions, right? At least in my opinion, as an interviewer, I don't think it leads to meaningful conversations. I think what leads to meaningful conversations is, okay, when someone actually says that, okay, here are 5 reasons why something could be the cause, asking a follow-up about one of those or asking for, could there be more reasons? I think that leads to a much richer conversation. That's at least my personal subjective opinion. So maybe it could be answered in that structure. Third thing is, in root cause, I think maybe using like some visual representation, like a mind node or a tree or something, right, might actually help specifically in root cause type questions. Because in root cause questions, you're actually going one level and one level and one level and one level deeper. So I think that's something which might be useful. And last one is, I think whenever there is a question around data, right, either on a pen and paper using tables or on Google Sheets using a table structure might actually help in thinking about how to answer the question, rather than trying to use like language or English and then trying to verbalize that language or English. Because you're essentially going to be looking for a metric or data, and tables might actually be a better structure to actually think and answer that type of question. Yeah, so those maybe 3 tips.
Fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing that. And I hope everybody who's been attending this session, watching us live on YouTube, are also going to take a lot of, have a lot of takeaways from this session. In the meanwhile, Anuradha has posted her question. So I'm going to quickly read that out for you, Anirban. So when Anirban says that Shrey was following a particular structure to answer these questions, should there not be any particular structure or frameworks should vary? What's your take on that?
No, I didn't mean that there should not be any structure or framework. You can use a structure or framework. In particular, the structure that I was referring to is, you know about 4 things that could be possibly applied to these types of questions. Do not like ask the interviewer directly that is it a problem with did the app go down? Was there an external PR related thing, right? Like those sort of questions. Did a competitor launch? That's another one which, keeps coming up, right? So those three don't ask directly as questions. Like I'll give you an example just to make this absolutely clear, right? A competitor launching could be a cause of a app or a product actually losing share. But you could answer the same thing by saying that, I'm going to look at my app in a basket of other apps which are in the same space. That's the data that I'm going to look at, and then see whether it's related to something related to competition or not. Because what happens is, in a series, when these three questions get asked, now it almost seems like it's like a copybook, and especially when there are the first three questions that get asked. So as an interviewer, it seems like, oh no, not again. Like these three things get answered, are so common, right? So that's the sense that you get as an interviewer. So yeah, Anuradha, I did not mean do not have any structure or framework. It's just that don't blanket copy that thing and apply it to any question.
Clearly, the idea is to make it more contextual and add a bit of a more depth to asking that same question. And I hope that answers your question, Anuradha. On that note, folks.
Just one last thing to add, like just think if you're a PM in a particular company, right? And let's say your CPO or your manager asks you this same question. You're not going to ask him, did a competitor launch, or did our app go down? Or maybe you could, but you're going to take that input, go ahead and look at some data, and then come back with, based on the data that I looked at, this could be like a possible cause, right? And that's exactly what this form of question is trying to simulate and evaluate.
Thanks a lot for that, Anirban. So, folks, this was the first in the multiple series that we have for our CA editions. We will be covering other types of product interview questions also. And if you're wondering how can you access this and more at NextLeap, in the chat, I have shared a link. Yes, we've decided to open up the NextLeap product community to all product aspirants out there. Feel free to click on that link and join the community. If you're not already part of it, as part of the open community, you have access to AMAs, masterclasses, and actual interview questions asked in different organizations shared by our learners themselves when they go through the learning process and the interview process. So on that note, I look forward to welcoming you on the open community. In the meanwhile, have a lovely, lovely day and look forward to our next edition on next Sunday. Bye-bye. Thank you so much for joining in.